So welcome everyone to the second edition of the DSO Study Club. I'm Bill Neumann with Group Dentistry Now, and we have our procurement panel discussion today. Really happy to have our guests with us here, taking an hour out of their day. We spent an hour yesterday preparing for this, so this is going to be a lot of fun. Some really good questions that we crowdsourced prior to this call, and then hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A afterwards. So we should run about an hour, maybe an hour and 10 minutes tops. And again, hopefully you can stay for the whole hour, but we will have a recording available. So I am Bill Neumann. The company I am with is Group Dentistry Now. We have a website that is all things group practice and DSO related. We have a newsletter that goes out twice a month. If you haven't subscribed to it, at the end of this, we'll have a link so you can subscribe, but it's free. And if you're in the DSO space, want to find out more about it, we are the go-to resource. So without further ado, let's welcome our panelists. And I am going to let the panelists introduce themselves and the organizations they're with. Oh, before I do that, we actually do have a poll. So I am going to launch the poll, and also panelists, you're allowed to vote on this. So the poll is, if you're with a DSO, what is your formulary acceptance rate? This is the only poll we're going to do. And then at the end, we'll announce the what the winning answer is. So there is the poll. And we'll let that run in the background. And so are you greater than 80%? Are you less than 80%? Do you don't know? Do you don't care? If you're a vendor, NA, please don't answer. Except for NA. All right, so Zack, why don't you take it away? Zack's with Rock Dental Brands.
Yeah, so my name is Zack McNiel. I oversee procurement and real estate for Rock Dental Brands. Been with the group for just over 5 years now. Rock Dental Brands is a multi-specialty DSO based out of Little Rock, Arkansas. We have just over 75 locations and over 600 team members. It's a fun, energetic, and hardworking group, and really excited for this opportunity to speak procurement today. And Bill and team, thanks for putting this together.
Great. Thanks, Zack. Nick, you're up. Oh, you're on mute. There he goes.
Thank you very much for having me. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nick Pakkidis. I'm the Vice President at dentalcorp. dentalcorp is Canada's largest, fastest growing network of dental practices. We're an organization that provides strategic insights and expertise in areas such as administrative support, practice optimization, HR recruitment, marketing, and procurement. We have 425 locations across the country, see approximately 4.1 million patients per year, and have 7,400 incredible team members across Canada. A little bit about myself. I joined the organization 3 years ago. First stint in dentistry for sure. And my career really spans across multiple different industries and different functional areas and different types of organizations: sourcing, supply chain, finance, technology integration, optimization, healthcare, publishing, gaming. Been part of different types of organizations, small, large, government, publicly traded, startups, and so kind of have a vast variety of experience throughout my career.
Thanks, Nick. Brandon, you're next.
Thank you, Bill. So my name is Brandon McCarty. I'm the CEO and co-founder of CureMint. A little bit about myself. I'm a former Army Ranger, and then left that and is now a serial entrepreneur. And my current venture is around solving a procurement challenge in the dental space. And my story around how I got into this was around 4 years ago. I had no knowledge of the dental specifics of procurement, and kind of the problem was brought to my attention. It looked really interesting, and my background in efficiencies and operations made it really interesting to solve. And we spent about a year really just diving into what the challenges are in the space. And we walked away with a really good opportunity that we can bring technology to this to bring efficiencies to the process within procurement. So company was founded in 2017. We spent about a year talking about what we wanted to build. In 2018, we built our first release, and we've been on market for about 2 years. We process about $1 million in spend per month right now and thousands of orders. And we really work with just about any vendor. So that's where we're at with CureMint. And we're located in Durham, North Carolina. And we're a procurement platform specifically designed for dental organizations.
Thanks, Brandon.
Yep.
So before I introduce John, just a side note, I knew John way back when he was a Cavo handpiece rep in the Philadelphia market. So go ahead, John.
Hey, thank you very much, Bill. Thanks everybody for attending today. As Bill mentioned, we go back about 15 years. I think he was with Colteen at the time. My name is John Parenteau, Vice President of Special Markets for Envista Holdings Corp. Our team represents the commercial businesses for Cavo, Kerr, Ormco, and Nobel Biocare systems within the DSO and other special market segments. So really excited to be here and part of this great panel to lend more of a commercial spin from a manufacturer into the discussion to help DSOs understand what we're doing. So thanks a lot, Bill.
Yep, great, John. All right, guys. So we're going to start off with some crowdsourced questions. And really, we're going to start at the beginning. So exactly what is procurement? So what's the definition of it? And then how is it beneficial to the DSO model? And Brandon's going to start the conversation here. And he thought that using this infographic would really help explain things. So you can start things off, Brandon.
Thank you. All right, so how we define procurement is it's really the ability to get what you need to provide your services. So it's really getting the items, supplies, and then making sure that they work. And so how does that benefit in the DSO model is around, your goal is to get the stuff you need to provide your services in the most efficient and cost-efficient way possible. And so that's why you want a process in place. And so we like to use this slide when we talk about process of like, what does the entire journey look like for procurement? And so in the dark blue, we have sourcing. So it's the idea of where are we getting and who are our partners? Then we go into procuring in the middle blue, which is the ability to execute that plan with your partners. And then the back end here is the light blue, which is pay, is around how do we actually pay for things and hold like the agreements in place and making sure that we're on track. And to break down a little more details, we break down sourcing with first is analyzing where we're currently at, our current state of what are we buying, where are there rooms for opportunities. And then when you come up with that plan, you then want to kind of select or put out, RFPs, RFQs, and identify partners that help you execute that plan. You select them, and then the last part here is formalizing. So you want to kind of take those relationships and agreements and put them into some sort of formality so that we can, move forward. Then we get into the procure piece, and this is the execution. I like to think of this as the day-to-day execution of that plan. So first is the catalog. So taking those agreements, having them in some sort of access point where everybody can execute that on a daily basis, those agreements. Ordering is your staff, your office staff, the ability to find the things that they need, and they're on the ground making the decisions there. Then we have a review and an approval process. We use review because we know that you're not necessarily blocking orders, but you at least want to have some sort of backstop to make sure that the decisions on the ground being made, at least you're able to identify whether or not they're kind of straying from the initial strategy here. Then we have the final piece of the execution is receive. So this is just making sure you're actually tracking what is showing up at the office. Back orders tracking, reconciliation of items at the practice level so that you can feed into your accounts payable team here. So after you receive the items, we go into pay. So we have we call invoice matching. So making sure that the invoice that's sent to your billing team matches what actually was received at the office. Once you get confirmation there, you want to cut the payment based off of the terms that you might have established with your partners. And then the last piece here is recording it. So whether that's in your financial system, however you want to record the execution piece so that there's a data point in your financial systems for your P&L statements, that's the final piece of recording. And then obviously it feeds back into your analysis when you're ready to do the sourcing, planning, and partnering moving forward. So that's kind of how I see procurement end to end.
Great. Zach, do you have anything you'd want to add?
I think that you made really good points. I'd say, within this framework that you've laid out here, you're really taking your ops team's ideas and dreams, and in our case, our formulary board, and bringing it to life, just going out into the field, figuring out who the best partner is, how we partner with them well, and how we eventually go to market with what we're looking for, big or small. And so within this framework, there's a lot of moving pieces to ensure that you're providing the best value, the best costs, the best implementation plan without overstepping, and making sure that you're in line with what your doctors and your providers need for your group.
Sounds good. Thanks, Zach. Nick, I know you had some input.
Yeah, and I think both Brandon and Zach covered a lot of great points, talked a little bit about process, a little bit about some of how you're working collectively with different groups. And again, procurement traditionally has been really known as, negotiation of products and services and delivering those products and services. And where we really try and focus, and we kind of, we look at procurement, we look at it as a strategic sourcing element of our organization, and how do we deliver more value back into our partners and our network. And a lot of that is really around, when you look at the steps, and again, not to be repetitive, a lot of them were Brandon and Zach both just covered. But again, you're really going through this continuous process of evaluating spend, understanding what you're buying, where you're buying it from, who you're buying, and what prices you're paying. Things like supply and who can actually supply those products. When you're evaluating cost, I think this is a very, very critical area where a lot of people focus simply on the price of the product, and they're not looking at total cost of ownership of that product or service. And what I mean by that is you're looking at things, not just the actual product price, but you're looking at things like shipping, warranty, service, ongoing maintenance, and cost, life expectancy, and evaluating it from a total and a comprehensive view versus simply what is the cost of the product itself to source. You're then going to really focus on identifying suppliers that meet your criteria, developing a sourcing strategy, and Brandon really talked about that around, whether you're going out for the formal RFP or you're doing an informal process, and then through that negotiating terms, price, contract management, which is a critical function. It's not a flashy function within procurement, but it is a very, very important one. It's a preventative risk mitigation tool, and that's making sure that making sure any terms that you're agreeing to are favorable for your organization and not putting you in an unfavorable position. And then lastly, it's about implementation and then tracking results and then restarting the process over. And that's one of the things when you look at, strategic sourcing and category management, it's continuously starting this cycle over and over again. And that's truly, when you talk about the benefits of a sourcing function for a group, a DSO, our network, it's really about that constant evaluation, whether it's economics, supply, risk mitigation, product research, analytics, insights, providing all of those strategic resources to the network and leveraging obviously suppliers, partners, et cetera, from a best-in-class service, education, program delivery. And it's really about, utilizing all of that, leveraging the size and scale of your network, strategic expertise, and resources to be able to deliver those services into our network.
Thanks, Nick. John, anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, these guys said it all. I think the whole process and in taking a systematic approach to the way you identify products and then the process in which you go to procure and pay, Brandon's system hit the nail on the head. There's a lot of good questions coming through from the group. I think from a commercial standpoint, our goal and objective, and I'm sure other manufacturers and distributors would say the same thing, is to get in on the front end and understand that dark blue portion with the sourcing to plan and partner, because that's when we can align strategic objectives with the DSO and the group to help help them meet their objectives within what they're trying to accomplish. Like Nick said, it's not just about the lowest cost item. It's about a strategic partnership and making sure that we're doing the things that are going to help you grow and become, successful.
Sounds good. Well, that's great. Now we all know what procurement is, right? So maybe we had a different perception of what it is, but now we better know. This is good stuff. So Let's talk about your procurement teams, and we're going to start off with Zack. Tell us a little bit about responsibilities, and not only you have, but your teams have, how many folks you have there, and then also the processes. So go ahead, Zack.
Sure. So on the front end, we have a formulary board that's made up of providers in the group that have an interest in the supply chain and procurement process and interested in the materials that we're using. A lot of work goes in on the front end, working with them and collaborating to build what was our formulary and continue to evolve. We'll get into that a little bit. As you move into my team, I have, including myself, I have another procurement analyst who is working to monitor and review and approve and track all the orders placed by our clinic. She's also helping constantly with supply questions through our ticketing system. And another pivotal piece to make it all work is our procurement system in itself, and makes our approval processes easier and helps our teams get visibility into what we feel is good product offering for them in their clinic. And then on the back end, we practice three-way match. So we're matching our invoice to our PO to what was received to ensure that we are, we're paying for what was received, and we're paying that in a timely manner. We have an accounts payable team of 4 that work tirelessly to make sure that happens.
Thanks, Zack. Nick? There you go.
Thank you. So when you look at my team, we really broken up into 3 verticals, and then within those verticals, we have category management that we look after. And so those verticals really are dental, overhead and indirect spend, and then we have technology vertical that falls under my area of responsibility. And so under dental, we break out the categories as consumables, equipment, service, and lab. And again, with all of these verticals, we're really heavily focused on what we just talked about with respects to sourcing, delivering exceptional service, leveraging our suppliers, delivering competitive advantages for our network and for our partners. The second category is really on overheads and indirect spend, and within that we subdivide it with practice. So things like telecom, office supplies, and we're really heavily focused on building national programs for our network to be able to take advantage of the economies of scale. And then our support center, so we're also supporting whether it's technology, marketing, travel management programs, and things of that nature. So we're also supporting those functions as well. And then lastly, the technology piece. So our procure to pay solution falls under my area of responsibility. And that technology group, we're really focusing on a couple key things. So one is optimization, adoption, and training. Those are kind of the really key focuses. And so what we're doing there is 1, system maintenance and optimization. So really around how do we create a better user experience for our network and our users? And 2, how do we leverage the full functionality and capabilities of the network to drive efficiencies, insights, and analytics back into our network? And then lastly, it's a training and ongoing support, and that really falls in the technology vertical. As new practices, staff, et cetera, join our network, we're really continuously focusing on training, educating, and providing ongoing support for them.
Thanks, Nick. John, you want to?
Yeah, so our procurement responsibilities are handled at our business unit level, and then we also have an Envista-wide approach. My team, specifically to the commercial organization, we handle all those activities, sales and marketing, clinical support for groups across 30 strategic account managers, 5 directors, and then, like I said, we have a additional finance and clinical staff. And our whole goal is to partner closely with DSOs to help scale their business, execution around formulary, helping improve procedural expansion and better clinical outcomes for patients, training and education, and then strategic growth programs. So work really in collaboration with a lot of the procurement agencies within the DSO segment to help make sure that we're doing those things properly.
Thanks, John. So we're going to get to PPE in a second because we know this is a huge issue right now, maybe bigger issue for some than others, but we'll certainly get to that. But besides PPE, what is the biggest challenge you face as a procurement leader? Nick, you can start that off.
Yeah, of course. I mean, again, I think when you look at sourcing and the function of sourcing, it's easily transferable across every industry. I think one of the biggest challenges I face specifically in dental is the product variety and the amount of suppliers that exist in this particular industry. I mean, when you look at the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of unique product SKUs that exist, trying to evaluate that, understand it. And again, because it's such a scientific, clinical-based industry, it's something that you need to truly educate yourself on. And so again, understanding that, continuously educating yourself on new scientific advancements, product, and solution offerings. So that's probably by far the biggest challenges. Obviously, it requires a significant amount of dedicated resources and time to be able to do that successfully. And so again, I think one of the advantages, you know, that we definitely have, and one of the things we definitely like to do is take advantage of our network, clinician staff across that to help educate us, give us a better understanding of the application of those products and services within dentistry. It allows us to do our job more effectively and deliver services better more effectively to our network.
Thanks, Nick. Zach, what about you? What's your biggest
Yeah.
challenge?
I think that Nick hit the nail on the head there. For us, it's that same thing, understanding what's available, understanding our doctors and our team's needs, and meshing those together in a world that's, you know, evolving faster than anybody can obtain the information to make sense of it. And you know, I would say on the back end too, when we talk about getting into our processes and what we've built, I think that a real reality that we face is implementation of our procurement system. We expect a high compliance rate to use that. And, you know, I think as DSOs grow, as we continue to work with our vendors, we see some cases where dark purchasing happens, where a rep comes into the office and wants to, you know, sell on the back end without going through our process. We're building something to where everybody has visibility, everybody has benchmarks and goals. And, you know, as we continue, in addition to what Nick said, I think that is a constant struggle to make sure that, you know, we're allowing everything to flow through our procurement system well, so that we have the ability to bring that to our ops, our finance teams, our clinics, and ensure that they are, you know, they're aware of what's happening and how they can better manage their clinics.
Good. So you call that dark purchasing?
That is what I call it. That's right.
Okay, that's good. That's a new one for me. Thanks. All right, so pandemic procurement. So we said we weren't going to talk about PPE, and now we're going to talk about PPE. So got a lot of things going on: supply chain disruption, government intervention, and this acronym that everybody seems to know. So Brandon, why don't you start off a little bit? What are you seeing with some of your customers when it comes to COVID-19 crisis and procurement?
Yeah, so one of the things we've obviously seen is the ability to get that stuff, right? So the typical partners they might have had in place don't have them in stock or back order, and they're looking to China to try to get it through, particularly if it's the distributor, right? And so what it's put the position of some of the dental organizations or DSOs is to find other sourcing and do it really fast, and not maybe through the typical process that they usually go through. And so with that, it's kind of just been a cluster of how to get through that. And what we found with the organizations that don't have a procurement process in place, or at least the technology platform, is the change management of ordering those things when you add a vendor that you might not have a relationship with yet. And then you have to retrain all of your staff of how to specifically buy that thing from that vendor. Adds complexity and compliance and all of that type of stuff. One of the things we've obviously seen is the ability for the DSO to own their procurement process. And so that when they're sourcing and they have to make decisions and flexibility like that you're not uprooting the processes on the ground at the offices, right? Like the office themselves are not professional buyers. They have a lot of things on their plate. And so as Nick and Zack are tackling these things from a sourcing perspective, they really just want to make it accessible to their staff. So we've seen a lot of challenges with that piece. And a couple of things too is with the quickness in which people are having to make relationships. We found that obviously sometimes the vendor or the bypassing distribution and actually having to connect directly to the manufacturers or the wholesalers has opened up an opportunity for maybe not the most ethical relationships. So we've seen a little bit of desperation on that side of things. And also we've seen opportunity where manufacturers have been able to work directly with someone like CureMint, where they've been able to put their stuff in there because the process is owned by the procurement or the dental organization, so that they can actually get directly to the manufacturer for products in those instances, which has really helped streamline getting the stuff they need to reopen.
Thanks, Brandon. Zach, tell us what's going on as it relates to the COVID-19 crisis and procurement.
Yeah, I think, for Arkansas and Missouri, I don't think we're experiencing the level of shortages that we see in some hotspot areas. I think by and large, when we look at supply chain across the board on the medical side, we're seeing that it's largely broken. Your experience may be different than mine, but I've received hundreds of offers from new vendors, with little to no background for PPE. And when you are approached like that, and in some cases you may not be able to receive those same items from a traditional supplier distributor, there is a ton of effort that goes into the vetting process to make sure what you're acquiring is certified, is what our teams need, and at the level that our governing bodies approve of. And for us, luckily, we acquired, once we caught wind of this back in March, we acquired quite a bit of PPE to get on the front end. No one could expect what was coming as fast as it came, but I'm sure, like many of you out there, it's not just the first phase of PPE that we're worried about. It's the second and third wave of replenishment that has to continue. And we're at a point where, I think there's a lot of DSOs, including ourselves, that have been in a bulk buying standpoint that's not based off of necessary demand that causes this issue, and likewise an influx of people capitalizing off opportunity to sell this PPE. I think supply has to catch up to demand. We need to quickly learn what our patient demand looks like post-COVID and start transitioning back into ordering out of necessity, and that's what we're looking to do, and looking to do quickly.
Thanks, Zach. Nick, what's going on in Canada?
Yeah, so Zach covered quite a bit. And so again, obviously, when the virus first started, what you saw was, whether it's government intervention, requisitioning of inventory from global manufacturers across the world, export restrictions, which obviously compounded the impact of the supply shortages. And then you started to see a lot of other countries follow suit with respects to restrictions, export restrictions, which actually made it a little more challenging in Canada due to the lack of domestic manufacturing for some very particular items. It's well known that the majority of manufacturing of personal protective equipment is done in China, but there is other countries that do manufacture some of these key items. One of the other things we saw that created a lot of challenges is obviously regulatory requirement changes with respects to personal protective equipment and what was required to service patients moving forward. And so Canada, obviously, we quickly moved to an emergency only visit, and some of the key personal protective equipment items, gowns, and more specifically N95s, an item that is traditionally never used in dental, which is what made the challenge of actually procuring those items that much harder. And so what we're seeing now, to Zach's point again, we're seeing a significant amount of, and we're talking hundreds and hundreds of inquiries from intermediaries, brokers, and with that comes, again, a significant amount of resources, vetting, and ensuring the product you're buying meets regulatory requirements. You really want to make sure that what the product you're buying does what it's supposed to do, and ultimately ensuring that those wearing it are safe. We're fortunate, we work extraordinarily closely with our compliance team, who helps us vet all of these opportunities, understand regulatory requirements based off of each of the provincial guidelines. So that's something that we're also dealing with, given that we are across Canada nationally. And then lastly, I think what this is going to do is really change how people view procurement of personal protective equipment, right? So it's always the conversation around domestic manufacturing versus offshore manufacturing and what that's going to look like. So ultimately, our people, the benefit of domestic manufacturing is obviously having local supplies, and we've already seen some manufacturers that are actually setting up domestic manufacturing in Canada for key items such as N95s and other personal protective equipment, which is a positive sign. But it's also managing the economic challenges that come with domestic manufacturing, and that's really around that price, right? So it's having supply readily available versus the price discrepancy that you get with domestic manufacturing. And so those are some of the things we're looking at. We're also heavily focused on what does future pandemic planning look like, supply mitigation strategies, and making sure that obviously we can take advantages of the economies of scale, bring down some of those inflated prices. Because again, we don't believe that this is something that's going to exist long-term with respects to some of the inflated prices, but it's the reality of the interim right now. And so we need to work through that until supply and demand equalize. And once that happens, I think you're going to see an abundance of supply of these items in the market, which will drive prices down. But you've also got the compounding effect of significant demand outside of industries that traditionally ever used personal protective equipment. And that's obviously adding to this, right? Whether it's your general consumers wearing masks in their day-to-day lives, whether it's industries that once would have used personal protective or it may have been elective, now is mandated. And then obviously the increased demand of some of these specialized items is definitely playing a significant factor in all that. But again, being part of a large network, having a lot of those resources, one of the distinct advantages, and we've been fortunate of our private equity partners who have businesses around the country. We've been able to leverage them and leverage global partners in many different industries, leveraging their insights, leveraging economies of scale, which has brought a significant benefit and advantage to us in this pandemic.
Thanks, Nick. And John, you have an infection control division, so tell us what's going on there.
Yeah, COVID-19 pandemic has put amazing focus on and products like CaviWipes, Caviside are in extremely high demand. So we've had to be very mindful of making sure that proper allocation to the front line, not only in medical as well, to make sure that we're taking care of the people that are dealing. Push to dentistry, more of our products toward medical side.
John, I think we're missing a little bit of that.
Sorry, I'll go back. Is that better?
Yeah, it's perfect.
All right. So early on in the pandemic, when dental was shut down, we moved a lot of our product over towards the frontline medical division to make sure the people in emergency rooms and hospitals that were seeing people that got infected were able to source these products and have them. As dentistry's reopened, though, obviously we've shifted that over, and we're just trying to make sure that customers like you and private practice and government accounts and things like that have the necessary means to go back to work with proper protection. What I've found, and I think Zack mentioned a little bit of it when he was talking, is all of a sudden everybody's an entrepreneur. I've gotten so many requests of, would your company be interested in this and that? And, I kind of facilitate them, but it's amazing what you've seen in the market with different equipment and different sanitizers and things like that people are interested in now starting on their own. So,
yeah, absolutely. Strange times. So we have about 40 minutes left, and I'm sorry, 20 minutes left. So I just want to check on the poll here, and looks like, all right. So everybody, there's a poll. So if you haven't, looks like we have 65% of voted. So everybody vote on this, please. We'll get this, give you the answers towards the end. So let's move on to the next question. So criteria and decision-making process when selecting supplier partners. So how do you choose who you work with? And then how can you make the process more efficient? So Nick, talk a little bit about how you work through who your supplier partners are.
Yeah, and I think it's heavily dependent on what you're buying, what you're looking to source and who you're looking to partner with. And so if you're looking, for example, to buy a very highly commoditized product, you're probably going to be focused on things like, you know, price and supply. How do I get the cheapest price? How do I make sure that, you know, that supplier I buy from can actually supply the quantities I need when I need them? And so it's really, it's going to be heavily dependent on what you're buying. For more complex products, service, implementation of programs and long-term strategic partnerships, again, you're always going to focus on total cost of ownership, and that's the price element. You're going to always focus on things like supply, whether it's the supply of service or supply of product. You're going to look at things like company values and alignment to your organization's strategic goals. You're going to look at things like investments in technology and innovation. Are you partnering with a company that's heavily invested in those key areas? Because those are critical areas moving forward. Scientific research, efficacy of product, services, etc. Education, another key element is, you know, do they have education platforms and content to be able to educate, especially when you're looking at things like the implementation of a program or service. And then lastly, support and service. You're really looking at, again, if you're looking to implement a program, it's one, you know, has that supplier partner, have they done this before? Have they had success? Get references, really understand their ability to execute on what that vision looks like. And really, to answer the second part of the question around making that process more efficient, I think it's really, the way to really do this is truly define your objective and what success looks like before you start going down the path of partnering with a supplier or looking to whether it's buy a product, service, implementation, partnership. That is one of the most critical functions. If you truly understand what your objective is, what you're trying to achieve, and ultimately what success looks like, putting in place some metrics or key KPIs to define that will really help you identify what are some of the key attributes that you need to focus on when evaluating that partnership. And it will eliminate any partners that don't meet that criteria very, very quickly. So it'll help you streamline the process, and it'll help you actually vet and ensure that you're partnering with somebody that's truly going to be able to meet all of your objectives.
Thanks, Nick. Brandon, what are you seeing with some of your partners?
Well, the decision criteria, I think Nick hit it on the head with, it's really about the data point. So in our framework, we talk about first is the analysis. So it's about having the data of what is our current state and are we hitting the objectives we maybe initially set in terms of time, back ordering, cost points. We put all this information in a spreadsheet and we had a goal to hit some sort of metrics. Are we hitting those items? But particularly around how can this process be more efficient is really where we're focused on. And to me, it's the idea of having the data at your fingertips and being able to, you know, pull that data in a format and in an actionable way that you can then deliver to your partners in a way that they can read and understand it so that they can look at it and make, you know, their best quotes or their best decisions that drive alignment. So everything Nick talked about with what is your strategy, identifying your values and all of that stuff, right? That's great. And then like, how do you communicate that to your partners and in a very efficient way so that your partners can get back to you quickly and you're all talking the same language? So what CureMint we really talked about here is like data reports and formats that matter, automating RFPs, RFQs, alignment, and then having the vendors, what are they looking for when they receive these items and what's the best way for them to kind of reply or partner with the DSOs in that area.
Thanks, Brandon. Zach, your last up.
Yeah, I would say, you know, what they've said is right on point. An easy way to, or an important part for me is to make a subjective decision objective. And, I think that an easy way to do that is we use a matrix, if you will, for, dependent on what we're looking for while we're sourcing, and we use a 100-point matrix. So basically, we'll take the qualities that we want to see in the product, if that's pricing, if that's contract terms, if that's efficiency, and lay those out in a, we'll lay them out in a Google sheet or a spreadsheet, and then we'll apply 100 points to those based on the value that we see them. So pricing for one thing could be 50 points, for another it could be 20. And then we use that to compare, you know, and really apply points to those you know, those different, trying to think of the right word, different baselines to essentially come up with a score that we could judge, you know, that vendor, that product on. So I would encourage you, if you're not, find a way to make a decision objective so that you can communicate that to anybody else in the organization.
Thanks, Zack. So this is more for the non-DSO folks we have here. So John and Brandon, what are some of the challenges both of you have experienced working with DSOs and group practices, and then the benefits as well? So Brandon, what are your thoughts wrapped around this question? Because it looks like based on the poll, we've got a lot of suppliers on this webinar. We had a lot of NAs so far with that poll. So I'm sure there are a lot of folks that are wondering what your thoughts are when it comes to challenges and benefits.
So from the CureMint's perspective, the challenges with working with DSOs, really it's around the connection between like the strategic planning. We talked a lot so far about sourcing, like the ideas, qualifying the products, the contracts, the terms. Really what we find is that the execution of that at the practice level, the day-to-day operations and the staff being aligned, there's often a challenging gap that's constantly occurring there, right? It's the, you know, management has their objectives and goals, and then the staff has their items, and we want those to be aligned, but the actual execution in terms of priority levels and stuff like that sometimes don't align. So really that's typically the process of, there might be a great idea from a management level, and then now you're wanting to implement it, and you're wanting your lead dental assistant to follow this thing that she might not even have been involved with, and it's really affecting her, but she doesn't necessarily have a say in this thing. So I think that's pretty much the biggest piece here, is what are we doing from a strategic and, you know, a corporate perspective, and then like making sure that it aligns and it can be executed at a staff level, and it's not adding process or challenges to them, but if you can make their life easier, that's where the win is.
John, what's your feedback?
Yeah, I think Brandon's last comment there about what's happening at the corporate level, not filtering down to the locations, can be a challenge that we see and we deal with. You know, we create a strategic relationship or partnership with a Rock Brands or something like that, and then what happens at the field level doesn't always translate. I think part of that challenge is, depending on how you get responses on your formulary compliance question, some DSOs manage those better than others, and part of their strategy is to manage those properly. So that's one thing. I think another challenge that we see is, you know, one of the goals of procurement within a DSO space we often hear is around reducing cost. And I think the answer Nick gave previously about treating products differently, whether high tech or commodity versus commodity or complicated procedural, it's really interesting when you see that. A lot of times we're not seeing groups discern that in that way. They're looking at it just as I need to get to a number and I'm going to get to that number. So that can be challenging. From a benefit standpoint, obviously fast growing segment, DSOs are very scalable. So, you know, establishing those strong top level corporate relationships and having those mutual objectives aligned helps both parties, both us and along with our supplier partners and the DSO grow.
Excellent. So let's talk about data. I've seen some Q&A here, and hopefully we can get to some of these questions, and some are wrapped around data and monitoring. Like I see one here, total cost of ownership. So let's talk a little bit about the role data plays in sourcing and procurement decisions, and then what KPIs are Nick and Zack, what KPIs are you measuring? So Nick, we'll let you start off.
Yeah, I mean, data plays an incredibly critical role, and specifically whether it's procurement or any functional business area. And today, again, I mean, technology is quickly evolving, and there's a rapid response to technology, talent, consumer demand. There's obviously a significantly more access to data and information. And that's critically important in making real-time decisions, providing analytics and insights. We're an organization who heavily invests, constantly looking at and evaluating, looking to invest in technology tools to use data more for strategic planning, to measure business performance, provide analytics, insights, etc. Specifically to procurement, again, when you're looking at things like contract management analytics, visibility on risks, vendor evaluation, so comparative analytics, whether you're going through a formal RFP process or you're doing comparative analytics from a product to product perspective to understand, if there's opportunities for savings within the organization, cost, spend analytics, supply chain management, and demand forecasting. So there's great tools out there that you can utilize and technologies to utilize to do that. And again, it's really about driving insights, providing analytics, driving efficiencies, measuring performance. And again, the more accessibility you have to data in real time, it truly allows you to make faster, more effective decisions and provide critical insights into the network that ultimately result in better outcomes.
Thanks, Nick. Zach?
Yeah, I think, Nick, again, I think you covered this really well. Getting into specific KPIs, I think you can, there's just a host of them to go over, from a broad standpoint down, you could start with, what is your supply spend as a percentage of revenue? And then you could drive it down into your supply cost per patient, per service, per specialty. And, and it can go from there to understand, you need to understand not just how you're trying to increase revenue, but what you're trying to do on the bottom side to drive costs down where it needs to be. In some cases, it may not need to be driven down, but you need to know where you're at. Moving into, quality, we've got formulary compliance rates. And again, I referenced dark purchases. I think that's, what percentage of your group is trying to negate the process that you have put together? And is that because the process needs to be improved? It could be. Or is it because there's some training that needs to be involved? So understanding what your teams need, and those are important indicators of it. And then going down into, I think the last touch is vendor metrics, which is, the list goes on and on, the lead time, invoice accuracy, the rate of emergency purchases you have to put in, number of back orders, and they all play a part in understanding who you are, what you're trying to be, and provide awareness and visibility to the clinics.
Great. Thanks, Zach. So we've got about 9 minutes left. We may go a couple minutes past 3 with hopefully get some Q&A in. So we've got a couple of last questions that were crowdsourced. And so here's a question for Brandon and John. What can a DSO do from an efficiency and predictability process to lower costs to serve them? So in other words, what are your thoughts about, hey, how do you make it easier for your supplier partners and then in turn lower the DSO's costs? Brandon?
What we've found as kind of a bridge between the supplier and the DSO is the idea of just predictability around, this is what we estimate that we're going to use using real data that's occurred over the last period of time. This is what we're predicting. And then the ability to actually execute that allows the supplier to better forecast. They have what's needed in the warehouses. They can make sure it's not back ordered on the quality. All of that stuff can happen if there's a predictability piece. And I think a lot of that ties around an actual procurement process, because if you don't have a process and there's dark ordering going on and stuff, your data points and the ability to predict what your organization is going to do falls short. And I think that causes a lot of headache for the suppliers, and that, we agreed on this thing. You guys want to drive down costs. You're negotiating contract terms and all of these things. And then, 3 to 4 months in, we haven't hit what we expected. And now it's cost the supplier time and money that they're not able to hit, right? And so if it's just the idea of, what we talked about, the formalize of the agreement, if everyone's aligned on what the objectives from a KPI perspective on both sides, and they check in and they make sure they're hitting that, I think that allows the DSO to better predict costs to serve you, and therefore it can result in a better partnership to get you to your financial goals.
That's great. John, you were shaking your head yes on a lot of that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what Brandon said. The predictability factor is huge for manufacturers, especially when you think about specialty consumables and things of that nature. So, you look at implants or aligners, things like that, you can predict the number of starts you're going to do on a monthly basis within a certain amount of percentage. So understanding that helps limit disruption, spikes, back orders, things of that nature. Brandon hit the nail on the head, and I couldn't agree more. We can be better serving you, and the distributors can be better off serving you as well. So that's perfect.
It's great. I wanted to share some of this all ties into the polling. So let me go through this really quickly and see if I can interpret some of this. So when I see 120, so we had 123 votes for NA. So that tells me they're vendors. Okay, so we have a lot of vendors on the call. That's great. If we look at people that are compliant greater than 80%, that is 15 DSOs. Between 60 and 80%, we have 16 DSOs, 15 at 40 to 60%. And then we get less than 40, we only have 6. And then a bunch of I don't know. So I don't know means you don't know what procurement is, or you don't have a formulary. So that could be what that is. But what I do see is, you've got some, and my guess would be, and we could add a couple other poll questions. If we looked at some of these greater than 80%, I'm just wondering the size of these DSOs. Are they larger? Are they smaller? It's hard to kind of understand, what's behind these. But it looks like there are quite a few that are greater than 80%. Hey, Zach, would you consider yourselves greater than 80%? I think we talked about this yesterday. I'm going to put you on the spot.
I would, yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And Nick, you guys do things a little bit differently there. So what would you say? I mean, do you guys have an idea of what your formulary looks like, or?
Yeah, and so I would say I wouldn't use the term formulary. Again, I think where we do things relatively different is we're curating and delivering content. We've built an e-commerce platform internally to provide that content and to provide pre-negotiated pricing nationally for our partners. But when it comes to, with respects to clinical autonomy, so we do provide full autonomy to our clinicians with respects to choice on products that deliver clinical outcomes. And so I think that's where we're relatively different than some of the models that do have very strict formularies. But again, we're constantly working at evaluating whether it's efficiencies, economies of scale, risk mitigation for all of those products for our network.
So that really, thanks, Nick. That almost leads into this question. And this is our second to last crowdsource question. So we'll go through this quickly, and then we'll get to the last one and maybe a little bit of time for Q&A. And if we don't get to your question, we are able to download all these questions after the fact. And, whether it's myself or Nick, Zach, John, or Brandon, somebody will get back to you and certainly answer your question. So we don't want to leave anybody out. So defining a formulary, this again leads into what we were just discussing earlier. Zach, is there anything more you want to talk a little bit about here when we talk about formularies?
Yeah, I just want to say real quick, and I can talk forever about this. The procurement process in general lives and dies by your communication with your teams. And, what we find a lot of times is that it's a lot harder to talk with a provider. So it's easier to go circumvent that process. What you find when you get in a room of doctors, providers, hygienists in general, and you start talking about how we're spending, what we're doing, you find that there's a lot more commonality than there is differences. And, so for us, our formulary, we laid it out. We went over our 12-month order history and really sat in a room and just talked about what we're doing. Why are we ordering 50 gloves when you can get down to 3, 4, or 5 options and, leverage that pricing? So, I would encourage you to take the time to talk with your providers, the ones that are interested. You lean on them to help make decisions and create reasoning behind it. And then you get to a point, I think, by and large, where you can leverage pricing based on everybody's ability to come together for a common goal. And that's what we're doing. So I think when you take a look at the formulary, we hold people accountable to trying to use those things. There's circumstances where you go outside of it, but communication front to end drives this, and it's doable. You can get down to that point where you've got just a couple items per category, and I think it's a responsible thing to do. And but that's, again, that starts with communication and being upfront, willing to collaborate.
Thanks, Zach. Anything more you want to add? I know you answered most of this the previous question when I showed the poll.
Yeah, I think the only thing, I mean, again, just to touch on Zach's point with respects to communication and leveraging, obviously, clinicians, staff, and expertise within your network, I think that's a very, very critical function. And it's something that we definitely focus on, whether it's through advisory committees or just leveraging key opinion leaders who speak, you know, on behalf of global organizations. We have experts in every discipline of dentistry within our network. And so it's continuously communicating with them, having those conversations, and, you know, driving insights and analytics from their knowledge and expertise.
Thanks, Nick.
Hey,
So
Bill,
we're running up against
I want to add one note on the formulary piece. So,
What was that? Oh yeah, sorry, Brandon.
yeah, could you hear me?
Yep.
So on the formulary items, you know, one of the ways that we've approached it was this idea, like a formulary, some people think of like, these are the things that we want you to buy. And it's just like this giant list. One of the ways we've approached it, we found to be valuable, was the idea that you really want to track all ordering, that there is no dark ordering occurred, as Zach put it. And so we call that kind of your catalog. So it's the whole world is available, and then you control that world. But really the idea of a formulary is just a list of products with a price attached to it. And so what we found is that you can actually build multiple formularies. Maybe it's your primary, your secondary formularies. You might have a clinical, a non-clinical formulary, and you could even build something called an off formulary. And what you're doing here is the formulary shouldn't be something where you're like, this is the only thing you can buy. It's that you're trying to prioritize where you would like them to go and give them the information to make those decisions. And so some sort of technology or platform that allows you to see this and then be able to slice and dice your catalog through those different formularies is something we've seen valuable around this idea of a formulary, not just being like this group of a bunch of stuff on it.
Thanks, Brandon.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a couple minutes. Well, we're right at 3:01, but we'll go through this quickly. So future of procurement. Zach, let's just start off with you. You're on mute.
Yeah, automation, I think, is a big part of this, based on you know, our trends and forecasts. And then, you know, I think consignment's a pretty awesome opportunity to really have our partners replenishing our supplies and using them, and you know, to limit our costs and ultimately help us have tighter inventory control.
Great. Brandon?
Yeah, so this is my favorite thing to talk about. So, you know, where we see the future going, where we'd like to see it go, is the idea of like, let's take the day-to-day decisions off the plate of your lead dental assistants, right? And so the idea of, you know, we're working on internally at CureMint, this idea of predictive inventory, using, you know, machine learning and identifying like what you're about to see for patients, what are the procedures being done, and that you almost can predict what you're going to need. And let's like make those decisions automated, and let's take the human brain power out of this. And then that drives the predictability and all of those things and removes headaches from your staff. So one is around, to be specific on automation, is the actual ordering decision point, having some sort of rhythm to that and automation. And then also through the back end of the invoicing process. So you know, one of the biggest things we see is that invoicing of, you might have 10 different supplier partners and you're receiving all these invoices. There's different ways to manage those invoices. How can you have it in one place and really at the ground level of the offices, automate that, you know, they've received the package, it's confirmed, it's three-way match is automated, and then automatically mapping that into your general ledger codes for financial systems. So the whole pay module that we showed on our framework is having that process be automated so that you don't have 4 accounts payable people spending their time mapping all of that stuff and tracking it all.
Okay. Nick, any final thoughts on this, on the future of procurement?
Yeah, just, I mean, to talk a little bit, I mean, I kind of broke it up into 3 key areas. In the technology disruption, I think, Brandon kind of spoke to that, and I think there's going to be significantly more disruption. I think COVID is actually going to accelerate the adoption of technology and bring significantly more innovations. I think you're going to see a lot more e-commerce, where traditionally that hasn't existed in dental. And so I think that's going to be a drastic change. You'll see a lot more digital platforms, whether it's educating staff on new products, training, etc. Artificial intelligence and machine learning. So Brandon spoke about that, is again, the implementation of that into technologies and tools to essentially drive efficiencies at the practice level and eliminate some of those administrative burdens. It's really kind of predicated on, what the model is really driven around. I think that's going to have a huge factor. I think you're going to see a lot of consolidation. I think you're going to see a lot of small organizations out there that, again, are going to be forced to have to adopt these technologies, which ultimately then I think is going to lead to significantly more consolidation within the industry. And I think ultimately that consolidation is going to lead to organizations putting more emphasis on integration of those acquisitions and really moving away from running them as independent organizations and selling products and services to selling solutions. So selling comprehensive solutions to organizations. And I think that's going to change the way we procure things and the way we value things. And that ultimately kind of ties into my last point around value selling, right? You're going to move away from traditionally just selling products and services to really delivering value and competitive advantages and selling solutions. And that will drastically change the way procurement organizations, procurement departments look at partnering with suppliers and how those solutions are sold into organizations like ourselves.
Thanks, Nick. John, we'll let you have the last word on this.
Yeah, Nick had a really good answer there. I think I'd agree with the rest of the panelists. Technology advancements within procurement are going to be the biggest thing coming. To elaborate on that e-commerce point, I think you're going to see those procurement systems connect closely with e-commerce systems more regularly and have uniform platforms moving forward. That's going to be able to establish value within the supply chain. And also just to expand on Nick's point around, I'd probably say procedural efficacy in making sure that there's more adoption of the things that you're implementing at a DSO level. I think it's going to continue to happen. It's going to be very important to do that as we move forward and not having missteps in what we're doing. So that's.
Well, great. Well, thanks everybody. I know we still have some Q&A here that we didn't get a chance to get to, but we will have access to this after the webinar is over. And also you'll have access to the entire recording on Group Dentistry now. So just wanted to thank the panelists, Brandon, Zack, Nick, and John, for spending some time with us today. We took up a little bit more than an hour, and then we practiced for about an hour yesterday. And so it's a lot of work on the back end to get to this point. So thanks for doing all this really great information. And if anybody wants access to this, again, afterward, go to our website, Group Dentistry Now, and it's free for everybody. You can sign up and watch it at any time. We also have a newsletter. So thank you. And until the next time, I'm Bill Neumann. Take care, everybody. Thanks again, guys.